Biddle know, but I suppose the same things apply. Remember that pursuant to the House Order of November the 25, we are in a hybrid meeting. There's some people on remote and some people on the floor. And as per the directive of the Board of Internal Economy on March the 10th, all those attending the meeting in person must wear a mask except for members who had their place during the proceedings. I'd like to make a few comments again, and that is that we adjourned the last meeting. So this is a business meeting. And as you can see, the order of notice on the business meeting is to continue on the bill C11 and to go to clause by clause. So the first thing we do is, I think Mr. Biddle's hand is up. No.
I think Mr. Upple's hand was up first.
No, Mr. Julian.
All right, I'm sorry, Mr. Biddle. Okay, so Mr. Upple.
No, Mr.
Madam Chair, Mr. Julian's hand was up first.
Oh, before Mr. Upple.
I believe my hand was up.
Clerk,
I
can
can
you
just
sort
start?
of tell me who? It's Upal, Julian, and then Biddle. Is that it?
The order that I saw, Dr. Fry, and it's in the order that you see the hands, but I saw Mr. Biddle, Mr. Nader, Ms. Ferrari, Mr. Watt, Mr. Uppal, Mr. Julian.
Oh, so you did not see Mr. Upal first. Okay, I will go over that list that you actually saw, because I saw Upal because he was on virtual. But please go over that list again. You have
Absolutely, Dr. Fry. Mr. Biddle, Mr. Nader.
Biddle. Yes.
Mr. Nader. So Mr. Biddle, Mr. Nader, Ms. Ferrari,
Yes.
Mr. Watt,
Yes.
Mr. Uppal,
Mr. Upal
Mr. Julian.
and Mr. Julian. Okay. And Mr. Biddle, please begin.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair. And I guess it's been a little troubling to watch. For those watching at home, we've been in the midst of a filibuster. I expect this will become, is it hour 6 and hour 7 of filibuster through this timeline. The Conservatives told us at the beginning of this they wanted 20 hours of study, that was a fair and reasonable amount of time to study the bill before it goes to clause by clause. We've exceeded that. They filibustered through the CRTC chair. They filibustered through an appearance by the minister.
Point of order? Not
Yes.
on what you're saying.
I have no idea.
It's
who's
John Nader. Just a
Yes, John?
just a technical issue, Madam Chair. I continue to hear Kevin Lamoureux in my ear. Nothing against Mr. Lamoureux, but he's coming in through my ear, and I hope I'm not going crazy. But that's a challenge I'm facing right now.
Point of order, Madam Chair. That is an urgent health and safety issue that we must address immediately. I feel very sorry for Mr. Nader.
All right, we will suspend while the interpreter, not the interpreters, the technical people, make sure that you are not thus have your ears inflamed or think you're going crazy, Mr. Nader. We will check it out. And the clerk will let me know when we think it's resolved.
Madam Chair, just to let you know, we're getting a technician in the room, and I will let you know as soon as it is resolved.
Thank you. Thank you. told that it's okay for us to resume, and so we will go back to Mr. Biddle, who was speaking before we suspended. Chris.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair. As I was discussing before we were rudely interrupted by Kevin Lamoureux, unintentionally, we was discussing that we're well into a filibuster. It's clear that we really should move forward on this bill. There's another study that I think we can really quickly deal with C11 and have a proper debate on C11, but then still get to Sports Canada before the House rises. And it worried me a bit last night that members of this committee were using this case to filibuster. And I know, and there's a tent from all sides that we want to hear from Sports Canada, but in the filibuster, I think people may have gone a little bit too far, and I think should use this time while we study C11 to really think about the legal aspects of the case, because a lot of things were said that were a little troubling to me that may lead to the disclosure of names, which I don't think anyone wants, or negative statements about the non-disclosure agreement, which may also be protecting the plaintiff in this case. And so, as a civil litigator myself, I really think that the opposition needs to take some time to look at things like solicitor-client privileges, NDAs, so that we can get to this as quickly as possible. But in the meantime, I know everyone likes to say that the House gave us the Sport Canada study, but they also gave us C11. And I think this is fundamental and important and something that we need to see through. But I know the Liberals are ready to work. I've spoken to our Bloc colleagues, and I'm sure Mr. Julien is always ready to work. And perhaps we could find, Hockey Canada, not Sport Canada, to clarify. But we're ready to work. We're ready to work extra hours to see C11 through to the end. But we're also ready to hear from Hockey Canada as well to get to the bottom of that. But I think there is some time that the opposition needs to take to perhaps speak with the lawyers in the caucus or speak with counsel at the House of Commons to understand where we're going, because there's some dangerous things that may happen even though they're well-intentioned. And I don't think any of us want that. So that's all to preface my motion, which has been handed out in both official languages. I move that the committee commence its clause-by-clause study of the Online Streaming Act no later than Monday, June 13th at 3:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So it's quite basic. This gives us lots of time to start it next week. I'm in speaking with the Bloc. I'm sure we should have a discussion in terms of setting a deadline for amendments perhaps this Friday so that we can really get things moving. I think that's fair and reasonable, but I wanted to put this on the table. And I think we can vote on this quickly and perhaps vote on this quickly, and then we can talk about the study right away, because this will take a minute or two. There's a couple people on the list, and we can get to talking about Hockey Canada right away, and I think that's important. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Bill. I know that there had been a deadline set for amendments, which we were still debating and had not had an agreement on or a vote on. But I do happen to know that the Bloc Québécois, the NDP, and the Liberals submitted their amendments to the clerk on Friday last week, which is what I think the 3rd or the 4th, before 4 p.m., the 3rd before 4 p.m. So there are amendments already sent, and so just wanted to flag that bit of information for everyone. Now, so we have a motion on the floor. Now, I obviously going to have to get a list of people speaking to or against the motion, so I will have to look at the order of people I now have and make sure that they are speaking to Mr. Biddle's amendment one way or the other, Mr. Biddle's motion one way or the other. So, Clerk, can you give me a list of people for the amendment, for the motion?
Mr. Nader?
Yes.
Ms. Ferrari?
Yes.
Mr. Lemire?
Mr. Who?
Lemire? Mr.
Mr.
Lemire?
Lemire. Okay. Right. Okay.
Mr. Julian?
Yes. Right. Thank you. So I shall move forward then.
And Mr.
John,
Upel.
Nader. Mr. Upel, thank you. John?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and pleasure to take the floor and say a few words about the motion before us. I'll offer a few observations off the bat. First of all, obviously, we've been looking at C11 for a period of time. We've heard from some witnesses. I know our witness list isn't exhausted yet. I know we have at least 20 members or so on our list that haven't had the chance yet to come here yet, but we'll put that aside for a second. But I want us to talk about the gravity of the situation that is potentially before us, and I do accept Mr. Biddle's comments about certain issues involving the victims. We did have a motion that was passed by this committee earlier this year to look at online harms caused by access, and there was the opportunity there, and that meeting never happened, but to hear from organizations that deal with trauma-informed testimony. And I think if we go ahead with a study on the events regarding Hockey Canada, I think it would be important that we have that conversation before we do hear from any witnesses. Obviously, as a committee, we have the opportunity to go in camera for certain testimony, certain issues, whether it's about identifiable people, whether it's with victims, whether it's issues from a legal perspective. I think there's always those opportunities. I think when it comes to this particular motion at hand, we're talking about Monday deadline to do this. This is a complex bill, and it will take a significant amount of time to go through clause by clause. And I'm very concerned that if we begin clause by clause on Monday, June 13th at 3:30, we will not have a chance to take up the House order that was sent to us on June 2nd or made on June 2nd regarding the troubling allegations. I'd remind the committee that it wasn't a partisan motion through the House. It was a unanimous motion endorsed by all parties, and frankly endorsed by the Minister of Sport herself, who made comments about the troubling possibility that government funds, that public funds, may have been used in this case, and I think that should be troubling for anyone and everyone who's in here in Canada. I mean, at the end of the day, I think we need to be sure that we as a country are standing up for victims, for victims' rights, and I think this is one situation where we need more information. And whether that's done through a committee process, a forensic audit has obviously been suggested within the organization itself. But there are people who must account for what has happened. There are organizations that must account for the situation that unfolded with this organization. So I think that's should be the priority of this committee going forward. That's not to say that C11 will never pass. I think that C11 will obviously pass through this committee when the time comes. It will go through clause by clause, and but I think for now the priority of this committee ought to be or should be the House Order of June 2nd, 2022. So I would amend the motion by deleting all the words after act and inserting the following. Following the completion of the committee's study pursuant to the House order made on June 2nd, 2022. So I'll read the entire motion as it would read if it were to be amended. That the committee commence its clause-by-clause study of the Online Streaming Act following the completion of the committee's study pursuant to the House order made on June 2nd, 2022. And just for clarity, the House order June 2nd, 2022 is the motion regarding Hockey Canada. So that's the amendment, Madam Chair. I'm happy to reread it if it's needed, but that's my amendment.
Point of order,
Muted
Madam
myself.
Chair.
Yes, I'm sorry. I was just going to Ms. Ferrari, who's next on the list.
No.
Yes, is that Peter?
Yes, it is, Madam Chair. And I
Peter?
just, through you, I wanted to ask Mr. Nader if he could read the June 2nd motion. He has it in front of him, I believe.
Je peux vous la lire parce que c'était la mienne.
I can read it for you because it was mine, if I may. That this House invite Hockey Canada to the Standing Committee on Canadian Heritage to shed light on its implication in sexual assault allegations committed in 2018.
Thank you, Peter. Did that satisfy you?
Yep.
Were you able to
Thank you.
hear it for
Thank you.
me? Thank you very much. All right. Then, so now I'm going to go to Ms. Ferreri.
J'aurais
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to the Heritage Committee for having me sitting in here today. Nice to see everyone. And definitely two topics that, for me personally, connect. Both C11, very important as a former journalist and online content creator, and obviously the investigation into Hockey Canada. And you know, I was able to take part last week, and my colleague Kevin Waugh, you know, made some very impactful statements, and I want to touch on that as I also sit on another committee, FIWO, which is Status of Women, and right now we're tabling a study on intimate partner violence, and it is really, as I lean into this role as a member of Parliament, what we do here first, or what our priorities are, speaks to Canadians deeply. And absolutely, I think every member at this committee and in the House, quite frankly, knows C11 is important, but I also think we all know how important it is to change the toxic culture of all institutions, whether it's Canadian Forces, sports, politics, whatever it may be. And I want to give a bit of a trigger warning, because I was thinking about this when I was here on Wednesday about some of the content that is coming out, and I am very aware of how delicate this conversation is for people who may be watching. That support is available for anyone who has been sexually assaulted. You can access crisis lines and local support services through this Government of Canada website or the Ending Violence Association of Canada database if you're in immediate danger or fear for your safety or that of others around you. Please call 911. And I actually pulled that trigger warning from an article that was released by CBC on June 5th, 2022, where the headline reads, "Former Headley frontman Jacob Hogard found guilty of sexually assaulting Ottawa woman." And in a time where we have headline after headline that is really re-victimizing victims, I can't stress enough how important it is to prioritize the study into Hockey Canada. And I think it really sets a precedence of what we're doing and where we're sitting. You know, the Supreme Court ruling of extreme intoxication as an excuse for sexual assault crimes is, I've had countless messages and people personally in my life that have been re-victimized by this. And I think there's an opportunity for us here to set the tone of what the priorities are. And because this is imminent, you know, I think it's really important. And what you guys are going to do, I think there is a consensus of what needs to be done here. I want to talk a little bit about what the Minister of Tourism, Minister of Sport rather, Madame Saint-Onge, has said in a scrum with reporters before Thursday's question period in Ottawa that she wants a forensic audit of the settlement to ensure Hockey Canada didn't use taxpayer dollars to settle the case. What I want to know, and what I think all Canadians want to know, is, was there any public funds used to cover up that horrible story of collective rape? And this is just so much bigger than this Hockey Canada. It's culture, it's if we're the leaders of this country, what are we saying to victims if we're not prioritizing this? And I think there's an opportunity for all parties to work together, because I think everybody wants to solve this, right? I think every member wants this to end. I look at things like Indian Horse. Is anyone? I don't know if anyone's familiar with that movie. It was shot in my riding, actually, of Peterborough Kawartha, but it's a book that many kids have to read, and it's a terrible story of sexual assault and abuse of power. And, you know, when you talk to people who work in shelters or who work with victims, they really go in thinking they're going to solve and fix it. Because you kind of think, why is this even still happening? How does this even happen? And as a parent, you think of this when you're raising your children. Like, what am I teaching my daughters about consent? What am I teaching my sons about consent? What am I teaching? How did we even get to a point where we're still having this conversation? And, you know, as somebody who was raised as a Catholic, the whole Catholic Church and Indian Horse coincides with reconciliation and abuse of power. And to have this Hockey Canada scandal exposed, we're not done. We're not done with setting a tone of what we accept. We're not done holding people to account. When you have the Me Too movement, what is still happening here that we're still having this conversation? And so, you know, I think it is critical that you guys have an opportunity, that this is the number one priority that needs to be served and paid attention to imminently. I also want to talk a little bit about C11 and the importance of it as well, because I have had literally thousands of messages on this bill, both from my social media, the parliamentary email, and, you know, here's one email of thousands. Dear MP Ferrari, I'm writing to you to express my concerns about Bill C11, the Online Streaming Act currently under review in Canadian Parliament. As it's currently written, Bill C11 gives the CRTC the authority to regulate user-generated content on open platforms, as it does for television and radio. In its current form, Bill C11 means Canadians will no longer be in control of their viewing experience and puts creators' livelihoods at risk. The government has repeatedly said it doesn't intend to target user-generated content. If that's the case, why won't they fix Bill C11 with specific language that excludes user-generated content from CRTC regulation? Open platforms remove traditional media gatekeepers, which allows for the democratization of content and provides an opportunity for creators and users from diverse communities, walks of life, and passions to express themselves, share their talent, and build a business. As one of your constituents, I'm counting on you to make my voice heard. Please help protect the digital creators and viewers in your community, and tell Minister Rodriguez to remove Section 4.2 from C11 to ensure that the bill does not apply to online content that is uploaded by any individual user. Sincerely, I won't share the name because I don't have the permission to do that. So it is absolutely imperative that this committee continue its work on C11. It is a huge issue across the board. As somebody who worked in traditional media, that went on to work in private media, who built a business off of social media as an online creator. But to circle back, and even when we look at what online content creation is also fascinating when we look at abuse or sexual assault culture. And for anybody who's a parent or a caregiver, you know that what your kids are consuming has changed cultures of who we were. I mean, I was born in 1979, and I'm just so glad I wasn't born in the time of social media. I wouldn't want half of that out in the public, that's for sure. But it's also changed how boys see themselves, how girls see themselves, how people identify in their gender. And it does come back to what my colleague Kevin Waugh said, and it was extremely powerful and emotional to hear it. When you know something is wrong and you don't do anything, if not you, then who? If we are the leaders of the country, if we are the federal body that governs what is accepted, and we are not prioritizing this and making a statement that says, hey, we got you, we are studying this, we want to change culture, we want to investigate this, what are we saying to every victim out there? And bringing these conversations up over and over again is so re-victimizing for so many people, and it is such a challenge. One of my favorite sayings is from Mr. Rogers, actually, and it is, anything mentionable is manageable. And if we don't address this, if we are not mentioning it, if we are not addressing that this is still happening, that there is still rape culture in sports and in this institution, that is saying, go ahead. And so I would urge this committee, who has a lot of power and a lot of influence of what you are saying to victims everywhere watching, that we do care, we do want to change the narrative, we do want to stand with you, and we will do something about it, and we will get to the bottom of this. Because without accountability, there is no change. And if we just allow people to abuse power because we're afraid, the cycle will continue. And the systemic trauma that is in place as a result of these stories is decades and decades and decades long. It is so impossible. And you want to talk about a mental health crisis and healthcare crisis and the money that is spent on trauma counseling. This is so systemic if you don't deal with it. And then the victims go on and have their children and they carry their trauma with them, and it is, the only way to break the cycle is to address it. Anything mentionable is manageable. And so I guess what I would leave this committee with and urge this committee with is that your actions speak louder than your words, and what you prioritize tells the world what matters to this federal body of people who are here. And I think right now, between the Supreme Court ruling and the hurt that so many victims are feeling, that we have an opportunity to study this now and to show victims that we have them. We have their backs, we're going to investigate this, and we're going to make sure that we do everything we can to make sure that this never happens again. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Yes. Now, perhaps I will thank you, Ms. Ferreri, and I will go to Mr. Lemieux.
Merci, Madame la.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for welcoming me. Thank you to every person around the table and every parliamentarian who supported the motion that I tabled last week. Like you, I was scandalized by this news, and it's our duty to follow up after this coming to light. We want to make sure that not a single taxpayer will have contributed to covering this story. And the higher-ups who could have participated. We want to bring that to light. For 4 years, I have been repeating the same thing. Hockey Canada needs to answer our questions. It's 2022. Something was sent to us earlier by Mr. Nader. I think it's very interesting. And it also goes hand in hand with what Mr. Biddle was saying. Here's what I propose. In the study that we are going to undertake, that the committee meet outside of regular sitting hours to start the study. And I like the idea that the Minister of Sports come for an hour and that the Hockey Canada representatives appear for at least 2 hours. Prioritizing is possible at committees. I work at the Industries Committee, and I can tell you that over the past 2 weeks, we have been very, very busy. I think that we can chew gum and walk all at once. So if we have the Minister and Hockey Canada, that will be 1 3-hour meeting, and we can satisfy Canadians who are listening to us, who are scandalized by this Hockey Canada story, and they want answers as quickly as possible. We can do so without holding ourselves back from C11. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, but are you now tabling a sub-amendment to Mr. Nader's amendment? Because we are now speaking to Mr. Nader's amendment to Mr. Biddle's motion. And so now, if you're tabling a sub-amendment, can that be formally done? Please?
Ça peut se faire comme...
Yes, that can be done as a sub-amendment. Yes, Madam Chair.
Thank you. So perhaps you could share it with the committee. Clerk, do you have it in writing that you can share with the clerk in both languages so she can send it to the committee so everyone knows exactly what that sub-amendment is, please? I would suspend while you do that. understand that while we took a fairly long time to suspend the meeting, it turns out that it is not going to be possible to get everything in English and French because of translation issues, et cetera, et cetera. So what will happen is we have a sub-amendment on the floor from Mr. Lemire. I would ask him to read it in French, and then the interpreters will be interpreting it, so make sure that you have your headsets on for interpretation, and then I would rule whether that sub-amendment is admissible or not. So, Mr. Lemire, could you please...
Merci, Madame.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would like to make the following recommendation for us to vote on the Conservatives' amendment, and next, depending on whether it is defeated or not, I could then table my sub-amendment because that would integrate well with Mr. Biddle's motion, but it would be more difficult to add it into the Conservatives' amendment. Would it be possible for us to proceed in that order if colleagues agree?
Well, I would like, because if you were going to use the sub-amendment that you brought up, it would not be admissible because it expands too much on Mr. Biddle's, not Mr. Biddle, Mr. Nader's amendment. So I would not have been able to rule it admissible. So you're withdrawing it. Is that what you're saying? And so I presume that because you withdraw it, I will go to the people whose names were there for Mr. Biddle's amendment. So my next person would be Mr. Julian.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Okay.
Speaking to the amendment by Mr. Nader.
No, I will offer another amendment, and then I will speak to it after that, Madam Chair. I would take Mr. Nader's motion, which he generously shared with me in his impeccable writing. He must have been a doctor. So I believe the amendment would read as follows. That the committee commence its cause-by-cause study on the Online Streaming Act at the same time as it undertakes the study, and Mr. Nader has the rest of the wording, the study that was mandated by the House on June 2nd. So at the same time as it undertakes, I would then add that the committee hold hearings into the allegations around Hockey Canada, and I'm very flexible in terms of wording in front of the amendment, on Monday, June 13th and Wednesday, June 15th. And furthermore, and that remaining amendments for C11 be tabled by 12 noon, Friday, June the 10th.
Could the clerk please read that out for me? Thank you. Or Peter, you can just go really, really slowly, but make sure that it is you are moving an amendment to, or a sub-amendment to Mr. Nader's amendment. So let's go slowly here.
That the committee commence its clause-by-clause study on the Online Streaming Act at the same time as it undertakes, and there's Mr. Nader's wording, the, if you might mind helping me, Mr. Nader.
The study of the committee's study pursuant to the House order made on June 2nd, 2022.
And then, furthermore, that the committee hold hearings into the allegations around Hockey Canada on Monday, June 13th and Wednesday, June 15th. And furthermore, that any remaining amendments to C11 be tabled by 12 noon on Friday, June the 10th.
All right. I presume the committee has got that. And so I will have to get a new list now of people to speak to Mr.
Yeah, and I'd like to
Sorry?
speak to it myself, of course.
Yes, of course, Peter.
Yeah.
But I will now move away from the list that was speaking to Mr. Nader's amendment to speak now to the sub-amendment. And I just wanted to, I think from what you're saying, it seems in order, and I would admit it, and because you did not, you spoke to both Biddle and NATO, and you're trying to pull them together. You didn't expand it as much as the Block's amendment would have. So let's go.
Beginning
with the list. Sorry.
So may I speak to the amendment then?
Yes, Peter.
Thank you.
I'm entertaining a list on this as well after Peter. And by the way, I just wanted the committee to know that we have a hard stop at 6:34. Go ahead, Peter.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I think the allegations surrounding Hockey Canada are serious. I think we all share that. And it is something that we do need to respond to and can do as early as next week. And I think we all agree that that has to be a priority. I think we all agree as well, or most of us agree, that C11 has to be a priority as well. And we have, for the last couple of weeks, we've had, I think, some legitimate filibusters around important issues, some that I do not feel have been useful expenditures of the committee time. But we have had most parties already file their amendments with the clerk, waiting for the improvements that we want to bring to C11. We've held far more than the 20 hours of the original hearings, though some of those were disrupted by filibuster, I would admit. And so now is the time for us to actually look at the bill and improve it, and we can do that at the same time as we look into Hockey Canada. So what I'm endeavoring to do is have the Hockey Canada hearings, have the deadline for amendments. As I say, 3 of the 4 parties have already submitted. So there's only one party that would need to submit its amendments. And even then, Madam Chair, as we know from the legislative clerk, amendments can be submitted up until the time we actually have consideration of clause by clause. So even then, it's not a hard stop. But I think the important principle of having all parties submit their amendments so that they can be produced and translated and circulated, these are all important in preparation. So what this does is allow us to do both important things at the same time, move forward at the same time. And I hope that my Conservative colleagues will agree that given that we're responding as well to the important issue they've raised, that we can do both. And let's proceed that way. We've had a couple of weeks where I don't think our time has been as well served as it could be. And now next week, let's get to work and fully use the time that we have available to us, both to look into C11 and look at that clause by clause and improvements to the bill, but also to look at these allegations that surround Hockey Canada that are disturbing, and I think we would all agree need to be investigated as well. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Oh, Clerk, do I have a speakers list?
Yes, Dr. Fry. You have Ms. Thomas, Mr. Biddle, Mr. Waugh, Ms. Goodridge, Monsieur Lemire.
All right. Thank you very much. So, Ms. Thomas, you are next.
Thank you, Chair. Sure. So I believe I was able to capture most of the sub-amendment. However, I may have missed a few points. I believe that the bottom line, however, is that Mr. Julian is proposing that we simultaneously study Bill C11 in clause by clause, and that we also take on the study with regard to Hockey Canada. Correct? Yes.
Seems to be what he is suggesting. Mr. Julian, would you like to respond to Ms. Thomas? It seems to me that that's what you were suggesting. Would you like to clarify, please?
Yes, exactly that. The 3 of the 4 parties tabled amendments last week. This would be asking all of the parties to table their amendments by noon this week, and at the same time, we would be starting that study next week at our Monday, regularly scheduled Monday and Wednesday meetings. So yes, we would be moving forward in both ways, and I think it will take extra work, but I think this is something that Canadians would expect of us as well, to tackle both important issues.
Thank you. Ms. Thomas, you may continue. Did that clarify things for you?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I appreciate that. Okay, I guess I have some concerns with this sub-amendment, just because we discussed in the last meeting the importance of the motion with regard to Hockey Canada and having them come forward, but also other witnesses. Ultimately, at the end of the day, our objective within that committee is to stay true to the unanimous consent motion that was passed in the House of Commons, which called for a study with regard to the sexual assault allegations that have been put forward by an unnamed woman. And then, of course, the Canadian Sport, or Minister of Sport, I should say, responded by saying that a financial audit was needed in terms of any federal funding that may or may not have been used to cover up the story of gang rape. And so it was determined that, by unanimous consent within the House, that this study was very important in order to get to the bottom of it. And so all MPs having agreed, with the Sport Minister having agreed, with importance being put behind that, it is incumbent upon this committee then to give that full attention. My concern then is that if we try to simultaneously carry responsibility with regard to clause by clause for C11, my concern is that the governing party would ensure that limited resources or finite resources that already exist within this place, the House of Commons, would be put toward Bill C11, because that is a government piece of legislation. Meanwhile, attention with regard to the Hockey Canada study would only be granted if resources happened to be available, but would not be given the priority that it deserves. And so that is...
I'm sorry, Ms. Thomas, you have the floor.
Point of order?
Yes, Mr. Julian.
Yes, these are the two regularly scheduled meetings where we already have resources allocated. So I just wanted to question Ms. Thomas on relevance when the two meetings that we already have scheduled that already have resources devoted to it would be devoted to this study.
Ms. Thomas? Mr. Julian interrupted, but I don't know that it really was a point of order, so why don't you continue with your debate?
Thank you. I think I've seen with previous motions that have been moved at this committee that even when dates or hours or allotment of time are listed, somehow it seems to be optional. So, for example, just even in the last motion that was moved at this committee, it stated that we were going to hear from witnesses with regards to Bill C11 and that we were going to hear from them for 4 meetings of 5 hours each. That's not what happened. We were told that it would be a minimum of 20 hours of committee testimony. When there was a proposal put on the table that more witnesses would like to be heard from, that was given no attention. And so I don't have any good faith remaining with regards to Mr. Julian and his motion or the members around this table. And so I don't trust that Bill C11 and the Hockey Canada motion would simultaneously...
Ms. Thomas, please. May I remind you that, in fact, this was not a minimum in the motion that was passed unanimously by this committee. It did say, and it did give the times and the days and the dates for the 20 meetings. We, in fact, if I may, doing my counting correctly, we had 22 hours of debate. And I would also remind the committee that one does not only get testimony from witnesses who appear before the committee in person, one receives briefs. And I think we have been receiving briefs from a lot of people, and that's part of testimony. Reading those briefs is part of testimony. So I just wanted to remind everyone that that is actually how hearings work with regard to witnesses. And we have fulfilled everything with regard to the unanimous consent motion that was passed many weeks ago. So go ahead, Ms. Thomas, continue.
Madam Chair, I'm sorry, I understand your disruption because you wanted to correct the record, but I'm just curious if that's a point of order, if that was just a chair's prerogative.
Yes, Chair, you made a statement that was not quite true. You talked about a minimum of 20 hours, and there was no such motion that stated a minimum. The word minimum was never used. So I was correcting you, yes.
Madam Chair.
Giving information that was not true.
Point of order, Madam Chair.
Yes, who is
It's John Nader. No, it's
John Nader. Go ahead, Mr. Nader.
I don't think this is a point that needs to really be bludgeoned too badly, but I just want to clarify. I have the minutes of that meeting in front of me, and just want to clarify the words minimum and maximum aren't in the motion. So it was never in the maximum of 20 hours. That was never there. And it never said minimum either, for that matter, but it was simply stating the hours. So I do have the motion in front of me from that that meeting.
I have the motion as well.
Yeah.
Yes, Mr.
Just wanted to clarify that.
Indeed, I have the same motion in front of me, and it was very clear. Not only the date of the 5-hour meeting, and then the following week of May the 30th, that one would have another 15 hours of hearings during that date. So that was completed. There was no word minimum and no word maximum in that unanimous decision done in good faith by this committee.
Yes, Madam Chair, and I agree. That was the motion of the committee, and we've achieved that. But that doesn't preclude any additional motions from this committee. The committee did fulfill that motion. But that doesn't automatically mean that we do anything after that. Presumptions and assumptions always get us into trouble, but we're now at the point where we're doing the next. And so the motion is what the motion is, and there was never a maximum or minimum including it, simply that we would hear 20 hours worth of witnesses, and now we are moving on to next steps. I just want to clarify that for the sake of the committee.
Absolutely. So we're not discussing listening. There's no motion that's come up asking for more witnesses to be seen or listened to or any such thing. There's no motion. So we have completed our task, and the motion on the floor by Mr. Biddle is to move to clause by clause. And that is, we're discussing Mr. Julian's sub-amendment to your amendment to that motion. So let us stick to the discussion, please, on Mr. Julian's sub-amendment. Thank you. Continue, Ms. Thomas, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I thank you. I think you've made my point quite handily for me, and that is that there's really not a lot of good faith at this committee. So you'll note that in that motion, maximum and minimum were not used, which means that there is an opportunity there that a subsequent motion or a sub-amendment or an amendment, I should say. I'm sorry, Madam Chair, I'm actually just going to pause here for 2 seconds. The guests to my left, the members to my left, Mr. Julian and Mr. Lemire, are talking right now, and it's quite loud, it's quite distracting, and so perhaps they could take that conversation outside, or perhaps you could ask them to bring their volume down.
Thank you for bringing that to my notice. Could Mr. Julian and Mr. Lemire just keep your volume down, please? Thank you. Continue, Ms. Thomas.
Thank you.
Speaking to the sub-amendment by Mr. Julian.
Thank you. So the sub-amendment that was brought forward by Mr. Julian, what I am stating is that there's not a lot of good faith left around this table Because as you noted in the original motion with regard to Bill C-11 and hearing from witnesses, there was no maximum and no minimum discussed, which then leaves an opportunity for us as members around this table to bring forward another motion or amendment to a motion that would call for more witnesses. Madam Chair, there have been several attempts to do that, and unfortunately, those have been turned down, or just not. There's no willingness to even consider. So what I'm saying is that starts to chip away then at any sort of good faith that might exist here. When we're not able to have those conversations or pursue things that that may be beneficial to the process in front of us. So when the motion is moved to ask for a study of Bill C-11 at the same time as the study concerning Hockey Canada, it doesn't leave a good taste in my mouth or give me any confidence that we are in fact going to do those two studies simultaneously and give the Hockey Canada study the attention that it requires in order to do it justice. And so all of that to say, I raise that as a red flag and wish to communicate my concerns and my dissent.
Have you ceded the floor? Thank you very much. The next person is Mr. Biddle.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair. I guess I do have to agree, there isn't a lot of good faith at the table. We heard a filibuster through the CRTC Commission. We heard a filibuster through the Minister. This is, I believe, hour 7 or 8 of the filibuster overall. We could have been through clause by clause at this point. And Mr. Julian proposes a reasonable motion to bring in Hockey Canada, and we just hear more of the same, more filibuster. We agree with Mr. Julian in terms of let's move this forward, but we can do it at the same time. This committee's done it before, going between studies and hearing different witnesses and pausing one study and picking up another. It's something that we can do. It's something that we've done. Let's get going on this. There is a unanimous consent motion, but there is also a motion from the House that we continue and we proceed with C-11. And I don't need to remind the members that legislation typically takes priority in parliamentary committees, but the opposition's right. This is an important issue, so let's do this simultaneously. Liberals are ready to get to work. Liberals are ready to do this. I know the NDP are, the Bloc are ready to get to work. It's just the Conservatives that want a filibuster, and that's really disappointing. And then it just really just shows that this sexual assault is just being used as a filibuster tactic, which is truly shocking.
Thank you, Mr. Biddle. I now go to Mr. Waugh.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Lots has been said here today, dealing with C-11 and also with Hockey Canada. And I spoke quite a bit on Monday on Hockey Canada and have received a lot of feedback since the Monday motion that was put forward. I've looked into the organization, who's still there, who's left, what's up for Hockey Canada. We have the Memorial Cup coming around the corner. And for those watching, the Memorial Cup pits the best hockey teams in Canada. You would have the Quebec Junior Hockey League champions, the Ontario Hockey League champions, you'd have the host team, and you'd have the Western Hockey League champions. So it's the 4 best teams in the country meeting. And it's interesting because the Memorial Cup is emblematic of the best hockey players meeting for the Tier 1 hockey championship, if you wish, in the country. And that's actually how Team Canada usually gets formed, is usually you get, in the case of the Edmonton Oil Kings, a number of their players, in fact, played or were selected for the Canadian Junior Hockey Championship. That was to be held in Red Deer and Edmonton, but because of COVID and the financial restraints of the organization, they lost a lot of money in the year before when they started the tournament. Then COVID came, and then what happened, the Russian Hockey Club and other European hockey clubs in Red Deer contacted COVID through a wedding, and the tournament had to be canceled. So it wasn't an ideal situation in Edmonton and Red Deer because they limited the number of seats that could be sold, and they lost a lot of money. So this year, if you may recall, 2022 in Edmonton and Red Deer, they just at the last moment decided to cancel it and reschedule it, I might add, for August, which is not ideal because the property...
Point out, Madame la Présidente.
Yes, is that Mr. Lemire?
Yes, Madam Chair. I think we're straying off topic at the moment, and we should be talking about having parallel meetings outside of regular sitting to talk about Hockey Canada, and on the other parallel, continue talking about CO11. It's possible to do both, and Canadians are watching us. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, continue, Mr. Waugh, please. I didn't really think that Mr. Waugh has the floor, and Mr. Waugh can speak to the issue. I think he's talking about the amendment. I hope, Mr. Waugh, you would not stray too far from that.
So far, I didn't think I did. No, I'd like to thank the block member for bringing, the unanimous motion forward to the House that he did in June 2nd. Since then, Madam Chair and those around this table, you have probably seen comments by the sports minister, myself, and others in the country really horrified with the situation with Hockey Canada. Not only the alleged rape, but I think Canadians also want to know, was there any taxpayer money involved in the paying off the situation that happened in 2018? And it wasn't, and here's the other thing, Madam Chair, that when we do bring Hockey Canada officials in, and hopefully they do come, we've lost a number from Hockey Canada already over this. And it was interesting because when this was filed April 20th, one senior member of Hockey Canada stepped down. Since then, we've had another step down. And these two people, hopefully, when we get around to witnesses, will come. And I am a little concerned that how do we get them here if they don't want to come here? And is there any way around this? Because procedurally, two senior people obviously knew a lot. And what happens if, and I have a list, Madam Chair, that I have given our team that at any time I can lay down with permission that we need to bring these officials here. But both are no longer with Hockey Canada, and that concerns me a little bit because they don't want to be tarnished, I would imagine, and yet both were long-term members of Hockey Canada, and both had, obviously, from 2018, had considerable knowledge what happened. Now with this, if you don't mind, and I'm going to move on a little bit, Madam Chair, I just want everyone to know that this was the Hockey Canada Gala that this happened. This incident happened at the Hockey Canada Gala in June of 2018. Okay? So this had nothing to do with the World Junior Championship that was played actually in January, but this actually deals a little bit with the Hockey Canada Foundation, which unfortunately is a fundraising organization of Hockey Canada. So when we do submit a list of guests that we would like Hockey Canada to bring and others, just remember that, It was the gala portion of it. And that's where this incident took place. Now, let me continue with C11, and it's interesting, Madam Chair, because yesterday I received 20 submissions on C11. That's right, 20. That's a lot of submissions. That tells me that on C11 we haven't done our due diligence, and these organizations that we all got emailed yesterday, thank you, Clerk, for doing that. That tells me as an organization around this table, we haven't done our due diligence. I've got friends here, used to be Friends of Media. They sent in a submission. Music Canada has been very critical of C11, and we haven't heard from them.
Sorry, point of order. Have we lost the chair? Oh, I think she's back now. I think it's fine.
Okay, can I go on, Madam Chair? I'm sorry, there was some. So anyways, the clerk sent all of us 20 submissions alone yesterday. We cut down a forest here just to see who is interested in coming to committee. You want me to move that? No? Okay. Are you okay, Madam Chair? Yeah, you're not hearing me, obviously.
Dr. Fry? Dr. Fry, can you suspend, please?
Well, I guess it's a moment of silence. Let me continue, and I'm not going to go back 3 or 4 minutes, Madam Chair, when you obviously couldn't hear what was going on. That was an internet.
Thank you, Mr. Wall.
Yeah, that was an internet issue. So anyways, just to wrap up on C11 here, we did get a huge amount from the clerk, 20 submissions alone yesterday, and that seems to me, I mean, we've got ACTRA, we've got APFC, I mean, you name it. These were organizations that, as I said, Blue Ant Media had, many of them were on our list, on not only the Conservatives list, but the Liberals, the Bloc, and the NDP.
Could you please stick to your debate on Mr. Julian's
I got a question.
amendment?
I do. So I'm just going to, if you don't mind, Madam Chair, my concern is this, with C11 and the Hockey Canada. If we continue with C11, I am fearful we will not have time to hear from Hockey Canada properly before we rise, let's say, June 23rd.
Point of order, Madam Chair.
But
point of order,
yes,
Madam Chair.
Mr. Julian.
Yes,
Mr. Julian?
I question Mr. Waugh on relevance. The motion clearly states next Monday and next Wednesday, which are the two regularly scheduled meetings of this committee. So I question his comments on relevance.
Thank you, Mr. Julian. Please,
do we have
please be relevant. You are speaking
Yep.
to Mr. Julian's sub-amendment,
Do
Kevin.
we have a Tuesday meeting already? Who set that up? You said Monday and Tuesday, Mr. Julian.
I said
think
Monday and
you
Wednesday.
misspoke.
Monday and Wednesday. Monday and Wednesday.
Madam Chair, if I moved a sub-amendment on Mr. Julian's motion that states all meetings then be designated for Hockey Canada study until the study is complete, and only then, when the clerk cannot fill a meeting witness, then we start with C11. Because part of this that I was talking about, Madam Chair, I just got 20 submissions yesterday alone. And we had the minister here on Monday that made some comments that the $1 billion all of a sudden that he thinks that this is going to produce C11. And he's made some other statements that I think we're going to get some more submissions in the next couple of days. I know we are. So my question is this to Mr. Julian then. Can we first just set aside, do the Hockey Canada on Monday and Wednesday then, and then after that, see what has come in, since we did have the minister here, and he's made some comments that I think some organizations, for an example, commercial content, he made that comment here Monday, and there is, this commercial content, I am getting a ton of emails on. It's not in the bill, and they're wondering where he's coming from on commercial content. I have, and he never explained it. I never got an explanation, Madam Chair, on the $1 billion. He actually turned to Owen Ripley, the associate minister, and we went for $830 million to $1 billion. So there's a couple of things that the Minister of Heritage said on Monday that I think we're going to see in our submissions this week. They want some clarification. We've had 20 in the last 2 days. I'm scared to know how many more we're going to get. So here is what I would like to see. Let's do Hockey Canada solely on Monday and Wednesday, if you wish. Bring in the Minister of Sport, who is, like all of us, very concerned with this. She's been quoted in many articles, not only about using Canada funds, but what about Hockey Canada? Have they learned anything from the past, and where are they going? And I've just mentioned many have left that organization since this story has broken. So let's deal with that on Monday. Let's deal with Hockey Canada again on Wednesday for everybody. We can have our witness list in before Friday on Hockey Canada and those. We don't need to identify anyone. I think the reporters in this country have identified, Joe number 1, number 2, number 3, number 4, number 5, number 6, 7, and 8, and they haven't identified the person, and we don't need to. But we do need to hear from officials from Hockey Canada Gallery, where the event was held, the foundation, and we need to hear from Hockey Canada itself, and, of course, the Minister of Sport, because she's concerned that maybe Hockey Canada, who receives 6% funding from the Government of Canada, 6% each year, did they use a portion of that 6% to pay the $3.55 million that has been alleged in some of the reports? So I would like...
Mr. Waugh, you are straying again, and I think if you're asking this, are you asking Mr. Julian a question? Because you know that you cannot move a sub-amendment, because you can't have more than one sub-amendment on the floor at one time.
So I would like to do the Hockey Canada Monday. I'd like to do it Wednesday. Which, vote yes on that. But
vote yes,
because I'm seeing so much paper come in the last 2 days.
Vote yes.
Which tells me on C11, around this table, we haven't done a very good job on it. That disturbs me on this. When I still haven't heard from APTN and diverse voices, right? We've heard from how many groups on diverse voices on C11 that will be affected? We've heard from 2. We haven't heard from the national carrier for the Indigenous. And they haven't submitted anything. You've had it on your witness list. I think we even had it on our witness list. And I think we need to hear from the diverse voices around C11. And that would give us some time to look through this, 20 submissions in the last 2 days, and then see if we have any others because of commercial content, because of the $1 billion. And then we can come back next week and, you know, we can submit our amendments to C11. How's that? But we need time because here's 20, and we're going to hear, I've had commercial content, which is not in the bill. People are wondering what that's all about. I can't answer them on that. The minister couldn't really answer it. He talked about commercial content. We've asked him about it, but the minister himself couldn't identify what is commercial content when it doesn't even show up in the bill. So I have really, you know, if we're going to do both of these, which I think we have 2 weeks left, Madam Chair, to the 23rd, and we can get it in. Hockey Canada Monday, Wednesday, have our submissions after that we can put in on Wednesday or Thursday next week, and we can move ahead and do Bill C11 properly, which we've, you know, been here for 4 or 5 months now dealing with it. It's probably, I think the government would agree we should not proceed with C18 at this point because we're not even done C11 right now. And I say 18 because I thought the minister in his testimony on Monday got both bills confused. And, you know, I just felt that we needed to buckle down. Thank you, Mr. Julian, for all your support on Hockey Canada. I think it's much needed in this country for everybody that wants to play for Team Canada, men and women. I think we need to go ahead with that. I agree 100%, but at the same time, because we're dealing with C11 and so many submissions, I would like to have a little more time to get the submissions to us from people that have reached out to my office, in particular commercial content. I can't answer them on that. And I'm not sure you can answer them, Madam Chair, or anyone around here, because commercial content does not appear in C11. So how do I answer that when the minister couldn't answer that on Monday? So that's why I'm a little reluctant to move on with C11 when I heard some stories coming out of Monday's meeting from the Minister of Canadian Heritage and his official, Mr. Ripley, you know, moving from $830 million to $1 billion, where does that come from? He mentioned YouTube once. And so I'd like to know where the extra $170 million is coming from C10, which had $830 million, and we've gone to $1 billion. And when I asked that question on Monday, it was like, where did that number come from? And I'm not sure we got the answer from that. But I am hearing from stakeholders that want to know a little more information on the commercial content, and I'm hearing from the $1 billion. How is the government going to get $1 billion out of C11? And what are they going to do with that? And I think we need a little more time to flush that out, if you don't mind, in the committee. I'm not filibustering here. I know, no? You may think that, but no. Well, not really. I'm
seriously, Hockey Canada, and you're filibustering it. Unbelievable.
Well, I don't like... Listen, we all want to do the Hockey Canada story. We all think it's important. I told you why we needed to do that before
Point of clarification, Madam Chair?
Right?
Yes, I would like to know who is raising the point of order.
It's Anthony, Madam Chair. I just would like a point of clarification on the sub-amendment offered by Mr. Julian. Could you clarify that would mean that Hockey Canada would be here on Monday and Wednesday of next week if this was adopted, Madam Chair?
Point of order. Order, please. Order. Now, Mr. Julian raised his hand on a point of order. I could not hear, not Mr. Julian, sorry, Mr. Housefather. I could not hear a word he said because someone was yelling. Now, I would like to hear Mr. Housefather's point of order, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair, very much. Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can.
It was actually, Madam Chair, a point of clarification to you. I was wondering if you would be able to clarify that Mr. Julian's sub-amendment means that Hockey Canada would be appearing Monday and Wednesday if this sub-amendment was adopted and then the motion was adopted.
Yes, it would.
Yes, that is my understanding of Mr. Julian's sub-amendment. Now, Mr. Wall.
Let me wrap up asking the clerk, have you heard from the Minister of Sport? And do you think officials from Hockey Canada, some that have left the organization and some that are there, plus the Hockey Canada Gala function, the foundation, because that's where this incident occurred, do you think we could get them here for Monday morning or Monday at 3:30?
I don't know that we can make that decision. The clerk will tell me if she thinks she can get them here. Clerk, do you think I don't know. That's a question that is so hypothetical because nobody has called anybody and asked them if they can come, Kevin. So I think that's really sort of getting a crystal ball out here of the clerk. She has to we have to first pass the sub-amendment or vote it down or whatever we see. You can ask clerk to do something until we have passed Mr. Julian's sub-amendment, if you so wish. There is no instructions neither to me nor the clerk. Or there are no instructions, sorry.
I'm done, Madam Chair. I just wanted to know if we could get these people in then by Monday, and we can get a list to you.
Thank you, and I think I would entertain a motion to adjourn because we have now reached our hard stop time at 6:34.
Wow. It's Chris Biddle, motion to adjourn.
Madame la Présidente, je propose qu'on...
Madam Chair, I think that we should continue until we reach consensus.
Meeting is adjourned.